Uh, today's program is called He Asked You What? And this is all going to be about inappropriate questions that you get asked during interviews. How many of you have ever been asked an inappropriate question in an interview? Quite a few. What's one that you were asked?
How old are you?
How old are you? Not beating around the bush, not icing on the cake. What? How many children do you have? What did you say?
Well, it was what year did I graduate high school?
Yes, what year did you graduate high school? Yeah, that's at least a little bit subversive. Cliff.
Will yesterday. What's your birthday?
What's your birth date? Jesus.
I
Okay.
challenged it, and they said, well, the first person said you have to give it. And I challenged it. I said, well, no, you really don't have to give it.
I just didn't give him the year. Yeah.
The second, the first person said you had to give it. The second person said you don't have to give it at all.
How do you get around it when they make you fill out an application?
Yeah, we're gonna talk about this. That's what the program's about. What about you?
Married status and citizenship.
Marital status and citizenship. All the questions that you're not really supposed to ask because that's none of your business. Right? It has no relevance to this job. It has no relevance to my ability to do the job. Ask me questions about my qualifications. Do not ask me irrelevant questions that are none of your business. And so questions about family, questions about money. How much money did you make on your last job? It used to be years ago, some of you are old enough to remember this, where a typical question on an application was, do you own your own home? And if you owned your own home, you were in the process of buying your home, you were considered more stable than a renter. Today, half the world's population it rents, and you can't gauge stability on anything really anymore, it seems. Age, very specific age questions, like the ones that you mentioned. Religion, especially if somebody is an unusual religion, especially if somebody comes in with a a scarf on their head or something unusual where it's just different, then it's like, are you going to require accommodation? Or back when I was in East Texas, the question you always got asked was, what is your church? Where do you go to church? They wanted to know because they wanted you to join their church. They were all about proselytization. And do you have a home church? Do you have a home church? And so if you said no for whatever reason, oh, come visit mine, and here you go. And it's in a job interview. So that was very common. Medical information, health information. Yes?
I've been told by my veteran friends who've been out, expect answers about PTSD.
Yes.
Or questions. And so I've got to figure out effective ways to combat that, to make sure I'm a normal human being.
You're all about combat, so figuring out how to combat that is going to put it in a different place. But yes, they ask very specific questions about that. They're concerned about that. Do you have signs of it? It's all private. It's confidential. There's HIPAA. They have to operate by that. It's none of their business. Who had
I was just going to say, on the Austin Digital Jobs Facebook forum, there was a discussion about whether someone should hide their military background on their resume and hide the dates of their service. And, of course, the answers were mixed. Some people said, well, hide it if it's not relevant. Other people said, you should be proud of it, and you shouldn't be working for a company that doesn't honor your service and shouldn't work with veterans. So it's kind of like, you get different opinions.
Okay, and I'm going to paraphrase that just so it gets on our video, since you're not mic'd. And so he said on Austin Digital Jobs, there was a forum, there was a discussion about should you hide your veteran experience? And some people said if it's relevant, if it's going to help you, you talk about it. If it's going to hurt you, you don't. You should be proud of it. Really, for those of you who were in the military or not in the military back during the Vietnam era, the reception to veterans, for the most part, is night and day from what it was back then, where there was a great deal of discrimination against veterans and all of that, hard feelings and so forth. It was a big mess. Today, veterans are so valued, and in fact, any company with a federal contract, plus government agencies, state agencies, are required to have, to meet this target in the very near future, by January of 2017, I think, they're supposed to have, I can't remember if it's 7% or 10% of their staff is supposed to be veterans. So they're working very hard to recruit veterans, make sure that veterans are well represented. There are lots of major companies, Home Depot is one, that are trying to hire as many veterans as they can in their management team. These people come so well trained and disciplined and with lots of good management skills and so forth, that there should be a big catch for a company to get somebody like that. But then there's the attendant, sometimes transition problems that come with just adjusting to the civilian world after you've been sometimes many tours over there in a difficult place. So yeah, veteran status is another one, medical health. And other things. I never thought that hobbies was an offensive question. Very often they'll say, so what do you do in your spare time? What do you do when you're not working? Or what do you do to let off steam, to deal with the pressure of the job? And so I always thought that was a fair question. If what you really do is haul your kids to soccer games and so forth, so you're totally absorbed in the activities of your children, then that's an intrusion on family and how many kids do you have and how old are they and that sort of stuff. So sometimes people adjust their answers to try to disguise that. But I never thought it was an offensive question. But I had a client come to my classes this last week, and she said, I hate that question. That is none of their business. That is none of their business. What I do for fun, what I do in my own time, it's an invasion of my personal privacy, and I don't like the question, and I know that I exhibit an attitude if they ask me that question. Yes, sir.
The flip side, I'm told that since I'm military, they expect me to be a drone. This is my opportunity to show them I'm a human being. So you're saying it's a bad question, but so it kind of depends, because I'm fighting that military stigma of, I'm a hardcore professional and I'm stone-faced, disciplined, and so I've been told this is my opportunity to show my human side.
Yeah, well, and I've always liked the question. I think it does show another side of you, and especially, it sort of depends, think about it a little bit, those of you who do volunteer work, because I'm a veteran, I go to the vet center, and I interact with them and kind of help them, the ones that are having problems with adjusting, and so I volunteer with my vet community. Or I'm very active, if you don't want to talk about church, just because you don't want to open up that potential prejudicial area as well, and you say, I volunteer with a nonprofit, just call a church a nonprofit, and say I do all kinds of things with different age groups, and I work with the kids, and I work with that, and I volunteer here and there. So just think about it a little bit. But Darla?
I think on the hobbies too, it can go both ways, but when you were talking about my kids are in soccer or whatever, a company that wants you to work 60 hours a week might see that as a detriment, so that's
Yeah.
part of the
And they say there's all sorts of things. Do you do team sports? That's supposed to be a good thing, right? Because you're a team player. Do you do extreme sports? Maybe you're too obsessed, and maybe you spend so much time, and maybe you're a health risk, and so it's like, really, what are they looking for? And what, just prostitute yourself. What do you want me to say? I'll be anything you want. If you will give me a paycheck, I'll be whatever you want me to be. Yes.
I was gonna say, I've gotten the hobbies question a lot, because I have a lot of hobbies actually. But I always have to pick the innocuous ones, and you have to watch the follow-up, because if you say, well, I enjoy gardening, then it's, oh, so you don't go home. And I flat-faced and lied and said, well, no, I'm renting, but because I'm renting, I still want to live somewhere nice. It's none of their business whether I own or rent.
Yeah.
The same thing, I volunteer, and then they say, oh, where do you volunteer? But you gotta be careful, because what if you're volunteering at Planned Parenthood?
Mm-hmm.
Or if you're volunteering somewhere right wing, and it gets into the whole politics. So you gotta think fast on your feet.
Yeah. So at any rate, but exactly. So you're going to think strategically a little bit about is this going to help me or is this going to hurt me? Yes.
I like this question. The reason I like it is because my understanding is basic. First thing
Okay, so what she said was, I like the question because so much of the interview process and the hiring process is, are you going to be a fit for the team? And part of are you a fit for the team is, what do you do on your off time? Is it solitary? Is it teamwork? Is it creative? Is it helping other people? Is you know, what is it that you do on your off time? And that it gives them some information. We had a lady named job club person from a long time ago named Christine Mitchell. The only thing she really cared about, she was a marketing manager, I believe, and her primary criterion for the next company that she wanted to work for was that they be very actively involved in the community, because she herself was very actively involved in the community, and she wanted to work for a company that would support that and that cared about that kind of giving back. And so she went to work for, it wasn't EMDs, but it was something like that, a medical malpractice or something like that. I can't remember what. But they were, one of them was on the board of directors of the Children's Miracle Network, and another one was on the board of directors of something else. And so she talked about that a lot. And they did support her and help her in her endeavors as well. John?
It's a really dangerous double-edged sword, in my opinion, because people have a tendency to look for like people. So you would have a tendency in that to be looking for somebody who has interests that are the same as yours. And so you get a team that isn't diverse, that all has the same interests, and you get ruled out even though you might be the best person for the job because you don't share outside interests. On the other hand, if you only talk about work, it's really hard to make that human connection outside of hobbies, politics, interests, and that sort of thing. So
Yeah.
addressing how to handle that is...
Yeah, getting some information about the culture ahead of time is good. For many years, I worked in a rather small city in East Texas, and the big company where everybody wanted to work was Eastman Chemical. And they everybody knew that they very specifically liked to hire people who had graduated from A&M, who were runners because they had a corporate running team, or who had been involved in United Way or Boy Scouts, those four things. So if you had any of those in your background, they figured you were their kind of people, and they liked it. And really, quite honestly, they were not interested in diversity, but that's East Texas. Okay, yes.
It also kind of, there's some overlap with the age question, because there are a lot of companies now, a lot of startups and others that incorporate a lot of social activities into their, into their company, and they show you, on the ads, they show the team all doing, activities together. And so when you get to a certain point in your life, you might have your own life, you might, you've got a family. You want to leave at the end of the day. You don't necessarily want to go out and drink every night. You don't, you may even have your own volunteer activities. And I think that there needs to be a healthy balance. So it is a good opportunity for the person interviewing you to find out who you are. It's also a good opportunity to find out whether this is the kind of company that you can really invest all of your time in if you've got kids and you've got other activities.
So that, don't forget, you are interviewing them as well. And you want to work for a company that also sort of shares your cultural values. If they say during the interview, look, every Friday we like to go down to 6th Street and have happy hour together. Are you in on that? And really, you like to go home on Friday and be with your family. But in order to get this job, and you really want to be part of this company, and you might say, sure, I think socializing with your coworkers outside of work is a good thing. I think it builds camaraderie and teamwork and so forth. Yeah, I'm in on that. And then you do it, on a Friday, and then maybe the next Friday you've got a commitment with your kids, and maybe the next Friday you've got something else you can't quite make it, and then the Friday after that you'll go. And so eventually they get to know you better, and so you can kind of gauge how much of that you want to involve yourself in. But at any rate, maybe even sometimes they'll ask you a question. You've been watching the debate? No, I could not. I did not. I was busy. I haven't heard anything about it. Because you never know, where they're gonna be. I've seen people get hired or not get hired because of a bumper sticker on their vehicle. On the other hand, do you want to work for a company that would hire you or not hire you because of a bumper sticker on your vehicle? You know, or whatever. So it's a dicey business for sure. Are those questions illegal? Sometimes maybe, mostly not. I used to teach, years ago, I used to teach a class to employers on how to interview effectively and legally. And so I wasn't sure, when you think illegal, that means if you do it, you'll be arrested. If you do it, there'll be penalties. If you do it, it'll be on your record because it's illegal and you've broken the law. According to EEOC, asking the questions on an application or in an interview is not in itself illegal. Using the information in making your hiring decision is what's illegal. And discriminating against somebody because of one of those personal things is illegal. And you cannot defend yourself if you ask the question and you have this long discussion about it. So that's where it comes. But in general, the questions are not illegal. I will tell you this, however, back when the different civil rights laws were passed in, what was that, 60, 63, 64, maybe 65, 75, then I think 90 with Americans with Disabilities Act, all of the different civil rights laws that impact employment and interviewing and so forth. When those laws were passed, I can remember that teams from the Department of Labor went all over the country looking at the application forms of people that had federal contracts or that did interstate commerce, and they went through applications and said, you can't ask this, you can't ask this, you can't ask this, and people's applications became so much more, open and not so accusatory about this. Those lists of diseases that they used to ask, done, you can't ask any of those. But guess what? These days, I see all of that stuff coming back onto applications. I've seen companies that have that same list of diseases. You're not supposed to ask any of that stuff because of HIPAA, because of Americans with Disabilities Act. The only people that are supposed to be able to ask inappropriate things are companies that are so small that they're not covered by those regulatory laws. If you have, I think it is, some of you may know better than I do, fewer than 15 employees, then you're not covered by the EEOC laws. But I see big companies that have the same list of diseases. They're asking inappropriate things. I don't know whether the Department of Labor doesn't care. They don't have the funds to send out the teams. That people aren't claiming discrimination the way they used to. I don't know what it is, but I see those inappropriate questions coming back on applications more and more often. So, what are your options if you get asked an inappropriate question? You can answer the question if you want to. You can evade the question. We're going to talk a little bit about evasion. You can refuse to answer the question, pointing out to them that it's an inappropriate question, and you feel they should know better than to ask you that. In which case, they will walk you out at that point. Or you can walk out. You have the option. I think that this line of questioning is inappropriate, and I think that I'm done now. So I don't want to waste your time anymore. I don't want to work here. And you're done. And you walk out. So, family questions.
Yeah.
Yes?
What do you do with those illegal applications? You just take a picture where it asks you all those inappropriate questions? Because they're not going to let you take that application outside of business.
And online applications sometimes are just as bad, in which case, yeah. If you
continue the application.
Yeah, if you're filling out an application and it's required field, and you have your choice, are you going to answer the question? In which case, you may never get interviewed because they're already eliminating you because of that information you've given them. If you want to cause them a little bit of trouble, I think you should take a picture of it, make a copy of it, and contact. In Austin, the EEOC. There is an EEOC office. What is it even called? I guess it's Equal Employment Office. It was moved to be part of Texas Workforce Commission. So they have an EEOC office, and you can file a complaint with them, and then I think that they will tell you there are certain violations that go to the Dallas EEOC office. There are certain violations that go to the San Antonio. The federal people take care of those, and then there are certain violations that are handled at the state level with the local EEOC office. So it depends on is it sexual harassment, is it racial discrimination, age discrimination. So I think voicing a complaint, this shouldn't be on here, and it is, and drawing attention to it, whether anything comes of it or not, I think you should do it. I think somebody needs to be alerted and get the mechanism in motion to perhaps correct it. So I absolutely would do that. Marital status. So lots of people maybe are asked about marital status, whether you have a ring, you don't have a ring. They want to know for whatever weird reason. Sometimes if it's a job that requires a great deal of travel, and they might say, I see you're married. How is your spouse going to react to all the time that you have to be away from home? Is that going to be an issue with you? Bringing up marital status is not ever the way to do it. The thing is to say this job requires 80% travel. Is there any reason that you would not be able to do that over the long haul? And not what will your spouse say, what will your family say, but just these are the requirements of the job. Are you in? Are you not in? Is there an issue here? Marital status, in some cases, depending on how attractive you are, can either get you a job or lose you a job. Children. How many children do you have and what are their ages? A recent situation, I have a stepdaughter who has a fabulous job. It is a high-profile job for a fabulous company. Her job enabled her to be backstage at the Beyonce Lemonade tour concert. She also was backstage with Adele recently. Because of her job, she got to go to the President's Correspondence Dinner. Her company sponsors Formula One races, so she travels all over the world and goes to those races. She didn't even know how to score tennis when she got the job, but now because of her job, she is best friends with the Williams sisters. And anyway, it's a great, fun job. She's featured on a video with the Cirque du Soleil people because she's representing her company on this video, explaining how her company came up with a technology, a phone app, so that audience members at Cirque du Soleil can be part of the show through their telephones. Anyway, so she's got this great job. And every time they give her an assignment, she does really, really well. She's totally devoted to it. And when the promotion came available, her new boss came to her and said, listen, I'm not going to give you this promotion. I'm going to give it to your coworker because he has a family to support. So it's a piece of information that's not supposed to be taken into consideration. If she wanted to cause him some trouble over that, she probably could. In that situation, having children, having a family, helped him get that promotion. Sometimes you have children, you have a family, and it hurts you because they say, that guy's got 6 kids. He's not going to be able to travel, although maybe he would want to travel. Depends on how you look at it. But sometimes, especially with the clients that I work with often in my regular job, they're all different ages. This is kind of a different kind of age range from sometimes I'm working with very young parents and so they always get asked, do you have any kids? How old are they? Are they in daycare? What's your daycare arrangement? They get asked lots and lots of inappropriate questions. And sometimes I've heard of employers who kind of set you up. They entrap people. So they'll say things like, man, I am exhausted. I had to get all my kids signed up for Little League and soccer for the summer. I couldn't believe how long that took. You got kids? And you're thinking, well, he's got kids, so he understands kids. And you say, yeah, I do. How many do you have? I've got 5. Really? How old are they? He might not even have kids. He's just talking as though he has kids to try to get you to open up and talk about your family.
At my last job, when the first day of school came up, I was like one of 2 people in my office who does not have children. And about 6 people took that day off, the first day of school, and it felt really unfair. It's like, well, they have to get all their kids ready for school. And so they get the whole day off? Okay.
So her coworkers got to take, they have kids, she doesn't have kids, and they took off, they had PTO, whatever, they took off to get their kids ready for first day of school. And you understand, it's a perfectly wonderful way to go. You get to walk your kids to kindergarten. I mean, it's appropriate, you need to do it. But the poor folks without children.
You just take off AC on Friday.
So, Darla's made a suggestion. Take off ACL Friday. So,
I think Judy applies to that, and the food company really finally said, no more paid time off in that week of October.
no more time off for ACL. All right, so, but children is in many cases can be looked on as a real detriment, a real problem with hiring this person over that person. Some places don't care that, they've got on-site daycare. They want you. It's a family-friendly place. They want you to have a good, solid family life, career, community, family. They want a balanced life. Lots of companies are like that, and it's just not an issue. But not all companies are like that. I'm just saying some of them it can come back to bite you. Clip.
Sometimes it's also amazing how some people don't realize a certain question or a certain thing they say is very offensive. That mean when I first got hired by IBM, which is very against anything offensive to the employees. I was a new employee, and I was in a meeting with a team, and one of the managers said an extremely religious offensive thing.
He did what?
He said a religiously offensive thing to me.
Oh,
and he didn't
okay.
realize I was in upstate New York, and they didn't realize I was a different religion than most people that were. And didn't even occur to them that that was an extremely offensive.
Yeah, the reasons for inappropriate questions. Sometimes it's just ignorance,
Right.
a lack of sensitivity, a lack of appropriateness. They just never thought of it that way. Sometimes it's just they want to get to know you better, and so they ask you innocent questions that in any other situation would be totally innocent. You're meeting somebody, in a business meeting. You're sitting next to them. It's not an interview. And talking to people about their family and their kids and what's going on in your world, it's always fine. But an interview, or in certain situations, that kind of language or that kind of question is just none of their business.
I was going to say, I think too, this whole family marital status is also sometimes a door for them to open the door to find out your sexual orientation.
Which in certain places is so the comment was sometimes having these discussions about family and marital status and so forth is a way to probe about sexual orientation, which in a city like Austin is not as serious as it can be in some other more conservative places. But yeah, or if you're not married, why aren't you married? I'd like to see your husband. You don't have a husband? Really? Who do you live with? Really? And so there it comes on. Yes?
I was going to say, I've reached the age now where I've gotten questions about my parents and how old my parents are and whether they're going to help.
So questions these days about parents because they just anticipate FMLA, anticipate that you're going to be in a sandwich generation or taking care of parents as well. Questions about your reproductive cycle. It's like, really? Really? I've seen people asked, what kind of contraception do you use? And the most irritating and offensive question having to do with that was, we got, years ago, back in East Texas, I had an employer who placed an order with us. And this was, I think he was a physician maybe, and wanted somebody to be an office nurse, if I recall. And he was irritated because he kept hiring young, attractive women to be his office nurse, and they kept getting pregnant and leaving him. And so he wanted us to write up an order that said that these young, attractive women had to either have had a hysterectomy or had their tubes tied or whatever. And I said, we can't do any of that. We can't do young, we can't do attractive, we can't do women, we can't do reproduction, we can't do any of that. And so he said, okay, fine, write it up the way you want to. But then he would ask those questions in the interview because he just didn't want them getting pregnant.
Hey, Kathy.
Yes, sir.
You know, I've been talking to some recruiters, and some have admitted to me that their employers looking for folks let the recruiters do all the illegal stuff.
Yes.
Say, we prefer.
Yes.
And it may have to do with quotas or just their culture or whatever. Is there any way to I'm happy the recruiter told me, you know, yeah, well, this is what my client wants.
Now, as long as, if it's an official approved diversity program, you know, if they're trying to have a diverse workforce and they have lots of times in order to get a federal contract, if your workforce is too monochromatic or homogeneous or whatever, and you're trying to encourage diversity in the workplace, which the government wants to foster, if you have a diversity program where you're doing outreach to try to have a more diverse workforce, they can have a preference for that. It's in some cases, especially with government contracts, it is a bona fide, what do they call it, a BFOQ, a bona fide occupational requirement. It's the same thing as saying we only want women to clean the women's locker room. That's the standard one that they use. So we don't want men going in there, it's only women. So it's a bona fide occupational requirement. And in very rare circumstances are you able to do that. These days, a lot of companies, a lot of tech companies, they look at their workforce and they say it's all white men with a smattering of Asians. But we need more women. We need more racial diversity. We just need more different perspectives. But rather, the approach should be, rather than having a quota system, rather than doing that, do more outreach at the schools and places, do more outreach at the places where diverse populations will read those job postings or whatever, and try to get qualified, talented people, and just do more outreach where they hang out and try to get it that way. Yes, sir.
I know Google has something very similar to veterans training programs where you outreach to people who may not be ready and give them, 6 months to a year to prepare to get into the company. And so as the school rep was, describing that, a lot of veterans groups are helping me out the same way.
Right.
And so there's nothing wrong with it. It's just like, hey, would you like to work for Google? Here's where you need to strengthen things, certifications.
Yeah. Get these skill sets, and then there are other ways that you can try to get diversity without having to say, this is a preference when you don't deserve it. Yes, sir.
Has there been any effort to kind of remove that requirement completely? Because I've heard some people argue that if the workforce is too homogenized, then the hiring preference goes toward diversity rather than qualifications, and that you're at that point you're hiring based on one of those categories, which is still hiring based on a category which you're not supposed to do. So rather than making hires based on that, just hire whoever's most qualified, and then whatever diversity you get is what you got.
Yeah.
There's another way to look at that, and that is to actually recruit more people who are qualified, who would otherwise be blocked because, there has been discrimination in the past. So they happen to be qualified, but they haven't had an opportunity to be recruited and hired because of some
and the approach is supposed
to recruiting to all the qualified people and then get a more diverse workforce, rather than doing it the other way around.
I mean, because honestly, if, let's say, Hispanic women are better at this, which I know is a big kind of thing you shouldn't say, right? But let's just say they are, I would personally rather have them doing what they're good at than having employers.
The point, we need to move on, but let me just say, we're done with that topic. But the point is, anytime you have that kind of an affirmative action thing, you're supposed to only have that play that card if everybody is equally qualified. They have equal qualifications, the same kind of education, the same kind of background. One's minority and one's not. That you go, in order to try to have a little bit more diversity, you go with the minority person. Not that you hire an unqualified minority or majority, whatever. Not that you hire somebody who's not qualified. It's that if all else is equal, then you do that. The outreach comes with things like if you only advertise in a place where one kind of person tends to see those ads, or if you give a great deal of we all know that if you know somebody on the inside of a company, they post it internally first, and they say, "Do you know somebody? Do you know somebody that you can recommend?" Very often, the people that we know are people who look like us. We know people in our age group. We know people in our racial group. We know people. We don't know people often in other groups, and so when you hire people that are from employee recommendations, which most companies do. You tend to get the same kind of people perpetuated. All right, money questions. What is your past salary? The two salary questions that we dislike so much are, what did you make on your last job, and what do you hope to make in this job? And there is, in my class on salary negotiation, I pass out an article that goes on and on and on about do not tell them what you made in your last job because it's irrelevant. Of course, lots of times you have to put it on there. It's a requirement. And these days, very often they'll even say, what was your past salary? And that needs to be able to be verified through a W-2 form.
That's usually the sales reps, right?
No, it's everybody. It's everybody these days. And one of our guys who got a product manager job at GM had to show 3 years of income tax returns about his past salary. That's unbelievable how irritating that is. And so often it has absolutely no relevance. I had a client the other day who has worked for 30 years as an auto mechanic. He's got all the auto mechanic certifications. Auto mechanics can make really good money. So he was at the top of his game. He never has liked doing that. He's done it forever. What he wants is a career in using math and science. He loves math and science. He likes chemistry. He likes math. And he said, and I said, do you have any experience working with that? And he said, no, I just love it. I don't mind starting out at the bottom. So if he has to answer a question like that, what did you make on your last job? Well, it doesn't make any sense. It was a lot of money. He's willing to start an entry-level position just for the opportunity to learn and to grow. And very often that's the case. Also, if you are in a traditionally underpaid kind of a career, so you're a female making 75 to 78% of what a man makes, so you are underpaid for that job anyway, or a minority who is underpaid, and your new salary is going to be based on that, it perpetuates that injustice, that financial injustice. So when I was doing some research for this, I saw that they just passed a law in Massachusetts that's supposed to take place, I think, in 2018, that says it's illegal in Massachusetts to ask that question about what was your last salary. So maybe it's a forerunner of other things. So, substantiated by W-2 forms. The desired salary, we've had lots of information, lots of classes and presentations on how you should try not to ever give a number. And we teach you a little script in our salary negotiation class, trying to evade giving specifics about that if you ever give a number or even a range. I'd like to have something in the, A to B range. Well, how much are they going to pay you? A. Why would they not? And if you give a number, very likely they'll give you a couple $1,000s a year more than the number. You should consider yourself fortunate. So how do you get around that? Huh?
Is there a database or something online that will tell you what the PMR is in your region for?
Glassdoor has got the range. Indeed has added a lot more salary information to their website as well. Salary.com, salaryfinder.com, payscale.com. So there's a lot of those things that give you the range. We just had 3 months ago or whatever, Justin Sharp was a speaker from AMD, a compensation person. AMD subscribes to a service called the Radford Compensation Data something or another. It is AMD's policy that they will pay 20% below the target to 20% above the target that is prescribed in the Radford stuff. So there's lots of different information out there. One of the things Justin said that I had never heard before was things like salary.com say, here's the salary information, but if you pay us, we'll give you a more detailed analysis. And he said that he felt that the one you pay for was more accurate than the one you don't pay for. I've always thought that the other one was really pretty accurate. John?
I dealt with some of that doing variable pay for ICM companies.
Mm-hmm.
And then going out and looking at things like Glassdoor, I find the ranges between software companies, small software companies, big software companies, and hardware companies that are lumped in is huge. You can have people pay 40 grand and 140 grand for the same kinds of positions, at least by name. So it's a little deceptive.
Somebody was telling me to go into, and I haven't done this myself, I need to do it, into the U.S. labor relations data, that they have to get a report of what companies are paying their people. So there's that. And candidate fees, what do you suppose that was?
Working with a recruiter?
I don't remember. I put it on there. What could that be? Candidate fees. Maybe so. Oh, yeah, maybe that was it, that anything that requires that you pay them money, that you should probably. And then credit history. It used to be for years, long ago, they would ask you just as a regular habit, they asked you about, they ran a credit report on you. And then that was declared inappropriate, illegal even, by the Department of Labor and the Department of Justice because it impacted, it had a disparate impact on minorities. Minorities tended to have worse credit than non-minorities. And then it started to come back because now it doesn't matter what you are, lots of people have bad credit. And so because it no longer has a disparate impact, we've seen it come back. And that very often when you sign an application, what you're giving them is permission to check your references, to run a criminal background check on you, and to check your credit history. And so that has come back as a determiner as to who gets hired and who doesn't get hired. Age discrimination. I don't know if that person would be discriminated against because of her age or that little nose ring thing. So very often they'll ask you, as you were asked, about your birth date of graduation, how soon do you plan, how much longer do you plan to work, when do you want to retire. Sometimes you see job postings that say, we're looking for somebody, an energetic, forward-thinking, whatever person. Sometimes they say recent grad.
Sometimes they'll ask you, what's your favorite movie? Or what's your favorite song? And, you may not be in the same decade as the people asking, so they're not going to relate to what you say.
That is true. So they sometimes they have circuitous ways to get around to figuring out that information. If you can dispel their concerns with humor, lots of times that's a wonderful approach. Sometimes people are they're just so pleasant, they're so likable that they don't care about their preconceived notion about whether they want to work with you or they don't want to work with you. And lots of people remember the 1980 debates. They've been replaying this over and over, where Reagan was questioned about his age at 80 or whatever. By the time you finish this presidency, you'll be 80 years old. You'd be the oldest president we've ever had. And what do you have to say about that? Is that going to be an issue? And he cleverly turned the tables on that and said, listen, I've made up my mind that I am not going to make an issue of the relative youth and inexperience of my opponent. So when he said that, that was the last time it was ever brought up. It was never mentioned again. And of course he got it. Medical things, I have always been told that for them to ask you the question, how many days did you miss last year because of illness, that was an inappropriate question. And then in my research, they said that question is okay. I think that there's a wonderful evasive way to get around that, where you say, I don't really know. We had PTO, we had personal time off, and so it was for vacation. It was for regular dental appointments and that sort of thing. So I don't really. I'm not able to tell you that exactly. It's none of your business anyway. But to just say this, I have no idea. Even when you really do. The list of diseases on the application, I cannot imagine that is in any way legal to do that. I've had heard of people saying, what was the most recent time that you were in the hospital for surgery? And that's just an illustration. Okay. Religion, politics, hobbies. What church do you go to? Who won the debate? What do you do for fun? Happy hour on Fridays. We've already talked about that. I wanted to tell you one last story. We didn't really get to do as much of this. Here's your solution to that problem as I had hoped to, but we need to end this. I had a client, a friend, who used to be an HR manager for Delta in Houston, Delta Airlines in Houston, and she was being interviewed in East Texas, a very conservative place. She had already gone through I think like the HR director or something like that. Great interview with that person. It was an excellent interview, and she knew that the next one was going to be with the VP of HR. And this was a person who had a reputation for being just a total jerk, crude and unprofessional. And I don't know how he kept his job as long as he did, because everybody pretty much hated him, and he was kind of a brute. But when she walked in, this was when you could smoke in the workplace, and so he was smoking a cigar. The office was just kind of nasty, and he was on the phone, and so she stood by the desk, and so that was when you weren't supposed to sit until they told you to sit. And then he was on the phone, and he answered 2 other phone calls during her interview, and every time he would cuss and swear, and he was so horrible on the phone to whoever it was he was talking to. And then when he asked her some questions, and one of the things he said was, so why are you here in this town? Why aren't you in Houston anymore? And she had really gone back there because that's where her parents lived, and they were getting on in years. But she said, I grew up here, my roots are here, I have lots of friends and family here, and I was just tired of the congestion of Houston and the pollution of Houston and just that whole rat race. And so I've come back here where I started. I'm building a house here, and this is where I intend to stay forever. So I'm moving my career to here. And then he said, so what's your status? And she said, what are you talking about? And he said, you married, divorced, single, you living with somebody? What's your status? And she thought, is this a test? Since it's an HR job, is this a test? Do I know the difference between an appropriate question and an inappropriate question? And so she had to kind of decide, and she said, well, I'm divorced. So she decided to answer. And he said, you got any kids? How old are they? And she thought, anybody with eyes in their head knows that if I had children, they'd be grown. But but she said no, and then he kept asking her other inappropriate questions throughout. And eventually, you know, she left. They offered her the job at a really, really nice salary, and she turned it down. She walked away. She said, I don't want to work for a company like this. And ultimately, you have that choice. If they're too obnoxious, if they're too snoopy, if they're too unprofessional, walk away. Walk away.